The headlines hit like a hurricane. Governor of Florida panics after South Florida condos ruin the market. And for once, it wasn't media hype. It was real. In the span of a few months, Florida's housing dream flipped into a full-scale meltdown. Condos that once sparked bidding wars now sit empty. Insurance costs are skyrocketing, and homeowners, the same ones who bragged about owning in paradise, are wondering how it all went so wrong. For years, Florida was untouchable. It was the land of low taxes, endless sun, and booming real estate. People left New York, Chicago, and California in droves, chasing the promise of freedom and affordability. They didn't realize they were stepping into a ticking time bomb. Now the governor himself is under fire, accused of ignoring the warnings, downplaying the risks, and celebrating a bubble that was already bursting. Behind the palm trees and press conferences, the truth is spreading fast. Florida's real estate empire isn't just cracking, it's collapsing. But how did paradise become the nation's biggest cautionary tale? Let's rewind to where it all began, back when the boom looked unstoppable and no one wanted to see the storm on the horizon. It started like a gold rush dressed in sunshine. Between 2020 and 2023, more than 330,000 people packed their bags and headed south, chasing the promise of palm trees, open skies, and tax-free living. Florida wasn't just growing, it was exploding. Every week brought another headline: Miami condos selling sight unseen. Fort Lauderdale inventory gone in hours. Even middle-class buyers were competing with investors wiring cash from across the country. In Boca Raton, a modest condo that sold for $480,000 before the pandemic closed for nearly $1 million just 2 years later. Agents juggled 20 calls at once. Sellers set deadlines. Buyers waived inspections. And the governor, always ready for a camera, called it proof that Florida had become America's promised land. Construction cranes dotted the skyline from Miami to Palm Beach. Developers couldn't build fast enough. Everyone wanted a piece of paradise. Retirees, tech workers, remote families, even YouTubers tired of California taxes. But behind the glamour and glossy ads, the numbers were already off. Prices were growing faster than wages, faster than lending capacity, and way faster than logic. When the median condo price jumps 80% in 3 years, it's not growth. It's a warning. Still, nobody cared. The boom had momentum, and momentum makes people blind. As long as property values climbed, it didn't matter that the foundation beneath them, insurance, infrastructure, regulation, was cracking. Everyone thought they'd get out before the music stopped, but markets don't whisper when they end. They crash. And the first sign of trouble came quietly, hidden in mailboxes across the state. It began with a letter, a few lines on official stationery that would change everything. Your policy has been canceled. For thousands of Florida homeowners, those letters started showing up in 2023. At first, people shrugged it off, just another insurance shuffle. But when they tried to get reinsured, the quotes came back brutal. $6,000 a year, $8,000, some even higher. It wasn't just the price. It was the message. Private insurance companies were abandoning Florida. Farmers, United Property and Casualty, St. John's, Vestal, all gone, one after another. Some filed bankruptcy, others simply pulled out of the state, citing unmanageable losses. By mid-2024, Florida accounted for 80% of all homeowner insurance lawsuits in the country, but less than 10% of the claims. Carriers were drowning in litigation and storm payouts, so they left. Condo boards panicked. Without insurance, you couldn't sell. Without reserves, you couldn't stay. And the only backup, the state-run Citizens Property Insurance, was already bursting at the seams. Monthly HOA fees doubled as boards tried to keep up. A $400 fee became $900. Owners on fixed incomes started skipping meals just to cover bills. But when they called for help, the only thing they heard was, "We're working on reforms." Everyone knew something was wrong, but the real estate machine was still spinning. Developers were still building. Realtors were still smiling. And the governor was still calling the boom proof of strength. The truth? The system wasn't strong. It was strained to the breaking point. The cracks weren't just financial. They were structural. And soon, those cracks would become headlines. The fall didn't come with a boom. It came with silence. Listings stopped moving. Phones stopped ringing. And the same agents who were bragging about record offers a year earlier were now begging for showings. By spring 2025, South Florida's condo sales had collapsed 25% year over year, according to the Miami Association of Realtors. Inventory exploded. Tens of thousands of unsold units flooded the market across Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach. For the first time in years, buyers had leverage, and sellers had fear. Price cuts became routine, $20,000 slashed, then $40,000, then $100,000, just to get a call back. Developers tried everything: free parking spots, waived closing fees. One Fort Lauderdale builder even offered a live rent-free for 6 months deal, and still couldn't fill units. Meanwhile, buyers were vanishing. Mortgage rates had more than doubled since 2022. And with lenders demanding 25% down payments on older condos, working-class families were simply locked out. Cash buyers? Gone. Investors? Sitting on the sidelines. The only people still in the game were the ones who couldn't get out. In just 6 months, the dream flipped upside down. Condos that sold for $500,000 in 2022 were barely fetching $400,000. And yet, taxes and insurance continued to climb. It was a perfect storm. Too many homes, too few buyers, and too much debt. The system that had promised endless sunshine was now drowning in its own shadow. Even the governor's office could feel it. Every week brought new headlines, new pressure, new panic. And while the numbers sank, the man who once called Florida the land of opportunity was about to face a storm far bigger than the economy itself. Because the collapse wasn't just financial anymore, it was political. When the real estate crash hit, everyone pointed fingers at the market. But insiders knew this wasn't a housing problem anymore, it was an insurance apocalypse. Florida's entire system was collapsing under its own weight. Every condo, every homeowner, every bank loan was tied to one fragile thread: coverage, and that thread just snapped. In early 2025, policy renewals arrived like warning letters from the future. Premiums that were already sky-high jumped another 40 to 60%. Average homeowners in South Florida were paying $6,000 to $8,000 a year, and that didn't include flood coverage. Waterfront condos? Try $10,000 or more. Then came the pullouts. Farmers insurance gone. Chevrolet retreating. United Property and Casualty bankrupt. Each exit left thousands uninsured overnight. The state-run Citizens Property Insurance Corporation was supposed to be the safety net. But by summer, it had become the biggest insurer in the state. 1.4 million policies, over $500 billion in hurricane exposure. Analysts warned one Category 4 could wipe out the fund completely, triggering emergency taxes on every Floridian with a roof. That's when lenders started to panic. No insurance? No closing? No closing? No market. Hundreds of pending sales froze in place. Real estate attorneys called it the quiet crash. Everything looked fine on paper, but behind the scenes, every deal was dying the same way. No coverage, no confidence, no cash. And then came the storm alert, a low-pressure system in the Caribbean. Just a watch, not even a warning yet, but the algorithms kicked in. Within hours, insurers imposed moratoriums statewide. Lenders followed. Every condo transaction from Miami to Palm Beach went into storm hold. Billions in real estate, frozen. The phones at Citizens melted with calls. Agents couldn't issue binders. Buyers were trapped mid-closing, deposits locked in escrow. And when the numbers hit the governor's desk, over $300 million in lost transactions in 48 hours, he snapped. The state's leader, the man who'd built his brand on control and confidence, finally lost both. What happened next became the clip seen around the country. The moment Florida's governor lost it. The room was packed, cameras shoulder to shoulder, reporters waiting for blood. Governor Ron DeSantis walked in holding a stack of briefing folders, face tight, jaw locked. Behind him, the headline blazed across the projector screen. Florida housing freeze, $300 million in lost deals. It was supposed to be a quick update, a few calm reassurances. But by the time he reached the podium, the weight of the numbers had already cracked through his voice. Reporters started in immediately. How many homeowners are still uninsured? What happens if another storm hits this month? Are you admitting Florida's real estate market is collapsing? DeSantis tightened his grip on the lectern. At first, he tried the usual lines: confidence, control, deflection. The fundamentals are strong. This is a temporary correction. Florida remains open for business. But the questions kept coming, harder now, relentless. "Governor, are you panicking?" one shouted over the noise. He snapped. "We're not in a crisis. Stop saying we're in a crisis." The room went silent, the kind of silence that feels like a fuse burning down. Then came the cameras, clicking, flashing, rolling. Within an hour, the clip was online, the caption brutal. Governor of Florida loses it over market collapse. 2 million views in a day. Talk shows called it the meltdown moment. Political analysts called it the beginning of the blame game. Behind closed doors, aides scrambled to contain the fallout. Press statements rewritten, talking points reshuffled. But the damage was already done. The governor's frustration wasn't just political, it was personal. His housing miracle had become a nightmare. Citizens insurance was buckling, developers were folding, and homeowners were looking straight at Tallahassee for answers that didn't exist. That press conference outburst was more than a soundbite. It was a signal. Florida's leadership was rattled. And when leadership shakes, confidence dies. As the clip went viral, so did fear. Buyers backed out. Sellers panicked. And the human cost of Florida's collapse, the people living through it, was about to come into full view. While Tallahassee scrambled for damage control, ordinary Floridians were paying the price. Across South Florida, mailbox after mailbox carried the same gut-punch envelope. Special assessments. Some were $20,000. Others $60,000 or more. One 71-year-old retired teacher in Hollywood opened hers and nearly fainted. $52,000 due in 3 installments, plus a permanent hike in HOA dues that doubled her monthly bill overnight. Her words to a local reporter cut through all the political spin. "I worked my whole life to retire here. Now I'm being priced out of my own home." She wasn't alone. Thousands of retirees on fixed incomes faced the same impossible math. They'd traded the cold north for the Florida dream, only to be crushed by the very paradise they believed in. Younger families weren't spared either. Many who'd bought during the boom were now underwater, owing more than their condos were worth. They couldn't sell, they couldn't refinance, and with skyrocketing dues, they couldn't afford to stay. Then came the blacklists, entire buildings flagged by lenders as high risk. No financing, no insurance, no resale value. Overnight, property that once felt like wealth turned into debt that couldn't be escaped. Meetings at condo boards turned ugly, shouting matches between neighbors, lawsuits between residents and associations. Some boards resigned entirely, leaving chaos behind. Others voted to dissolve, selling buildings off to developers for pennies just to make the pain stop. Meanwhile, moving companies saw a new kind of migration, Floridians leaving Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, Texas, people packing U-Hauls not for adventure, but for survival. The dream was dead, and beneath the palm trees and pastel skies, a quiet truth settled over South Florida. Paradise had a price tag, and for most, it had just become unaffordable. Soft transition, the storm fades, the skyline quiets. But even after the chaos, one question lingered in every conversation, from the governor's office to the last family moving out. Can Florida recover? Or is this the beginning of something bigger? By the end of 2025, the Florida skyline told a different story. Cranes hung still over half-finished towers. Sales centers were dark, windows plastered with for-lease signs. The once unstoppable boom that fueled Florida's pride had finally run out of gas. Economists called it a market correction. Homeowners called it a betrayal. Because behind every chart and headline were families packing boxes, retirees canceling doctor visits, and landlords watching tenants vanish overnight. Governor DeSantis promised reform, extending condo inspection deadlines, easing tax burdens, pledging to stabilize the system. But the cracks ran deeper than policy. The state's housing engine, built on migration, speculation, and low regulation, had turned fragile. One hurricane, one lawsuit surge, one insurer collapse, and the whole system could seize again. Experts warned that Citizens, the last resort insurer now carrying over $500 billion in hurricane exposure, was one major storm away from insolvency. And that meant every Floridian with a roof over their head could pay the price, whether they owned a condo or not. Yet, amid the wreckage, something else was spreading: fear beyond Florida. Coastal states like Texas, Louisiana, and the Carolinas started reviewing their own insurance systems. Analysts called it the Florida effect. Because what started in Miami and Fort Lauderdale wasn't staying there, it was rippling across America's Sunbelt. For Floridians still holding the line, survival meant adaptation: smaller units, shared policies, creative financing. But the dream, that vision of affordable luxury by the sea, had shattered. And as one exhausted homeowner told the Miami Herald, "It's not the storms that scare me anymore, it's the bills that come after." So, what happens next? Maybe the market recovers. Maybe it doesn't. But this much is certain: when greed, growth, and government collide, the sunshine always comes with a shadow. Florida's boom built an empire of sand, and this was the tide finally coming in.